We're going to take just a few minutes. I think there's a few more people in the waiting room. We'll allow everyone to get in. And then we'll get started. Thank you all for coming today. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Bodine Al-Sharif, and I'm the Faculty in Residence Emeritus for the Commission for the Global Dimensions of Student Development, CGDSD. On behalf of the International Colloquium Planning Team and the CGDSD Directorate Board, I'd like to welcome you to the third session of the 2025 International Colloquium. This year, we are proud to present a series of 4 webinars. But before we get started, I would like to share with you our equity and inclusion statement, because here at ACPA, we are invested in the idea of equity and inclusion. So if you'll just take a moment to look at our statement, to think about it, and also understand what that commitment means. And we'll just pause for a few seconds here for you to take a look. The colloquiums will explore critical issues in higher education and internationalization, focusing on international students, education, well-being, and social justice in global context. Submissions may address themes such as mentoring international professionals, transnational pedagogy, graduate student support, career pathways, transitions, social justice, immigration, and just redefining international students. In addition, we're excited to share that our commission is actively recruiting directorate board members. Involvement in the directorate provides the opportunity for ongoing engagement with colleagues with a shared interest in international education and cross-cultural learning. We have up to 10 open positions. The application deadline is 11:59 p.m. Central Time on April 30th, 2025. The application and info session related information can be found at our Linktree link, which we are now placing in the chat for you. Before we get started, we'd like you all to share with us just a bit about who you are. Please go to the chat box and give us your name, pronoun, location, tribe, if applicable, current position, and your affiliation with your institution or organization. Give everyone a second to do that. Thank you for sharing. Today's session is titled The State of the CGDSD, Critical and Emergent Conversations on International Perspectives in U.S. Higher Education. It's presented today by the Directorate Board of our Commission, and I'd like to take a brief moment for each of our Directorate Board member presenters to introduce themselves. If you all could just give us your name, title, affiliation, and your role in the Commission. Milad, would you mind starting?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Milad Mohebali, he and his pronouns. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm also have the honor of being a faculty in residence with the Global Dimensions with ACPA. Julie, do you like to go next, or?
Yes, yeah. We can do the popcorn, right?
Popcorn.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Dr. Julie Brines. I'm an assistant professor at Western Illinois University, and I teach in our student affairs program. I, like Milad, I'm also a faculty in residence elect for the commission, and I use she, her pronouns. Krishna, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Hello, greetings. My name is Krishna Bista, professor of higher education at Morgan State University here in Baltimore. Yes, thank you. And Liz?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Liz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an undergrad international initiative coordinator and a PhD student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And I'll have Lisi, maybe, if she's ready. Oh, then I'll go to Laura.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Vaughn, and I am finishing up my PhD at Florida State University, graduate in 2 weeks. and I am vice chair for educational programs. And I believe Pankaj?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Pankaj Desai. I'm the past chair for this commission. Really happy to be here today. I'm the Senior Assistant Director for Inclusion Initiatives at the Career Center of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
And Lijing isn't presenting today, but she is with us. So Lijing, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks everyone. Hi everyone, thanks for coming to our colloquium. My name is Lijing Li. I'm currently the commission chair for this wonderful community. I work for Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome again, everyone.
And again, my name is Marianne Bodine Al-Sharif. I'm an associate professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm happy to be here and to moderate for the session. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we think about this emergent critical issues from our perspective as a commission, one of the big things that are coming up that we're all kind of trying to grapple with is just what is internationalization today in today's current climate? What is it? What does it mean to be an international student, a scholar, a practitioner, an educator, or a faculty member? Has that definition changed as well? And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment so that our members can just talk a little bit about what that is for them today. So for those who are speaking today, our presenters, please, can you share with us just a little bit? What is the term internationalization mean? Not everyone at once now.
I can start with a few things. So when I think of this, I think of, I'm looking at it in terms of my program, and we're going to talk about this a little bit when we break out into the different chat rooms, but I teach in a higher ed student affairs program, and I have a lot of international students that have started to apply, and we've been accepting more and more of them. And so I think of how can I make my curriculum, my program more welcoming and more global, because we are bringing in more perspectives, not just focusing on what happens in the United States, but what happens elsewhere, so we can bring those different contexts in. So I think of internationalization as almost like expanding, right, beyond where we thought where we've been and where we think we are, but looking towards the future. And I do a lot of my research is on supporting international students in terms of especially graduate students, because I work so closely with them. And so what does that support look like in terms of, their education, when they get to campus, all those kinds of pieces, as well as what does that look like in terms of helping them find a job, right? Where we are enrolling students into our programs and HESA programs, and the course context right now in terms of the administration of the country is going to cause more challenges. But how do we support those students as they're graduating and moving into the field? And so that's where I've actually partnered with a couple of my students. One is from Grenada, and another one is also from the Caribbean. And we have a book chapter coming up that we're writing. We presented at NASPA and ACPA on these very types of topics. So when I think of internationalization, I'm thinking of expanding and going beyond where we have been so far. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I also in the same boat as Julie mentioned. Now internationalization means more than ever we have thought in the context of the present, geopolitical tensions. So in this multi-dimensional process where we bring the international, intercultural, or global perspective into in our teaching or research or the service that we have been doing at the institutions we work at, for me, yes, it has given me a chance to rethink how we can still further our institutional partners and bring, colleagues in our research collaboration or global citizenship. I have been also doing multiple book projects and also the Star Scholars programs across the, countries. So it has given me the chance to rethink, revisit some of our biasness, perception, more into current geopolitical tensions, and also this global perspective into domestic context, regardless of our physical mobility And as a faculty members, from South Asia into working at an HBCU in the US, it has given me to bring more my South Asian perspective into curriculum, engaging, as a part of the internationalizing at home. So again, it is so much. And now, I have a PhD in international and comparative education program, although the current US geopolitical, the stress has given a little bit impact in student enrollment, and also to expand in terms of the funding and other things. However, again, it has given a chance to rethink, revisit why it is so important, to have these global mobility and cross-cultural initiatives.
I can build on some of those. Sorry, Marianne, if I cut.
You're good.
And build on some of those that Dr. Brines and Dr. Bista shared. And one way that I think of it as a few intersections. One, the intersection of the higher education itself, like universities and colleges becoming more internationalized in some of the ways that my colleagues talked about, and also the ways that the field of higher education, the field that studies the higher education, is also itself becoming more internationalized, as like Brines was saying, in terms of students coming in. And to me, one of the questions that I continue to grapple with is that what does it mean for a field that studies United States higher education to become internationalized? And what does that mean? Is it just about inclusion of international people into it? And it is already happening. I don't know if our field is necessarily acknowledging some of the shifts that are happening in our own fields, labor, which is then going to shift the student affairs and administration in higher education over years. And also, most importantly, with some of the ways that we think of, I think DEI too, we don't have a perception of what does that look like. I think in a lot of ways, the current dominant paradigm in our field that studies higher education and also higher education itself is that we are including these different others into our programs, and we want to make them fit into our narratives or our paradigms of how higher education should be run, how higher education should be functioned, what is the role of higher education administrators. And I think some of the ways that I'm thinking about these questions is about maybe there are ways to actually bring those different perspectives to actually transform US higher education and the study of higher education, because it's actually a good thing to bring people from different perspectives and not have them fit into the narratives, but actually have and being able to listen to their narratives so that we can transform our fields and transform our universities. But I think that really needs a different shift in our paradigms and the ways that US is so centered in that field, the ways that the current existing faculty are socialized into fields that have been US-centric. Most of them are not trained, like Dr. Bista, who is trained in comparative international education. So I feel like these are some of the really big tension points for me that I continue to grapple with, and I write with the students about some of these topics. What does it mean to include international perspectives in ways that would transform the field, not just add them to it as a, an additional layer of, here's an additional layer of diversity.
Milad, you make me think about the fact that, we produce many of the administrators in higher ed. And so this is a good time for those who are teaching in these programs to turn the microscope on themselves and ask, are we producing internationalized administrators who understand that bigger global mission? Anyone else would like to comment on that?
I'd also throw in there too, when I think about internationalization, I think about, us, like what you're just saying, Marianne, like being advocates, right? We have to recognize that we do have a role, especially if we're teaching in programs like this. How can we be, in what spaces are we an ally, in what spaces are we an advocate, and in what spaces can we be an activist? I teach a framework on that to my students and looking at their different roles, but we have to, we talk a lot about belonging and inclusion and diversity and all those kinds of things. We teach those things to our students, but then how much are we being a role model or pushing those agendas, those kinds of things, instead of it just being something we say, something that we do. And again, that internal look, I think, is really important, regardless of if we are teaching or if we are working right? I mean, in terms of people who are on hiring committees, people who are, working closely with students, trying to take a look at that picture and see we are having more students coming to the United States. We are having more people applying for jobs. How are we providing that welcoming space and bringing in those voices?
So we often think of international students as those who are holding an F1 status or something similar while they're studying here, but is that truly who international students are today? So I'll pose that question to our group today. How do you define an international student, faculty, practitioner, scholar?
I mean, I definitely would say it's not just related to visas because that ignores the fact that there are people on refugee statuses. There are those who have green cards or have, married somebody and have come into the United States. And also, if we look at international students, we may be, since most of us here are within the United States and we're working in the US space, we may be thinking of international students as anyone who is not in the United States. However, if we were going to be located in like Canada or the UK or China or Nepal or somewhere like that, an international student would be anybody who came in to study who was not a member of that home country. So the word international student really needs to be more inclusive of those different perspectives and the contexts that we are in, as well as the students who are coming to the institutions we work at.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree on this. I know the US government or the legal definition have been changing over the years. For example, in the way even NAFSA started, it was the National Association of Foreign Students. It changed over the years. And I hope, the national institutions might go that way to redefine themselves, because international status probably should not be defined, the international students, not only the educational, professional experiences, rather than solely by the visa classification. And we have that debate over the years about who is international and who is not. In fact, no matter what, once we have the visa and passport and travel another country, everyone becomes international or global. So these are the working definition. Government might have a different policies, but as an educators, as a researchers, I think we need, it's a time for us to think about what would be the broader inclusive way to include the students, faculty, those who are always constantly mobile.
I like
Quickly,
how, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry about
go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay, I really think it's interesting how you brought up the definitions, and I think in higher education we always try to define things, right? We have to define things in our research. We have to define, but I get worried when our definitions and our labels miss people, right? They miss someone, and I know we have to have that, but I mean I think of even just in terms of first generation status, right? In terms of first generation, how those students are defined, but what about students who maybe we assume have a certain type of, because their parents did go to college and graduate, we assume they have this certain kind of capital or they have these certain kinds of things, and they don't. And so they don't technically match a definition of a first generation student, but they represent them in all the other ways by not having that capital or knowledge or understanding. So that's just kind of an example of, I just worry about definitions, even though I know we need them, but we need to look beyond that as well. Sorry, Pankaj, I think you want to say something.
Glad you said that, because I was going for, I think these definitions depend a lot on our approach and our own insight into who we are. So I would think of internationalization as a humanitarian concern. It is not necessarily transactional in the sense that it is between governments. It's, if at all, between people. And I feel like the more time and space you give to defining these, it becomes bigger and bigger, at least in my mind. It is no longer anybody's concern alone. If, let's say, one country does it one way, it is, after all, a transmigration of people. And these people could be leaders, these people could be the movers and shakers of tomorrow. And so, in some ways, we are defining the future through internationalization, the future that is perhaps no longer ours to cherish, but to hand over to future generations. So, to me, internationalization is a promise for the future as an investment in the present. And so that I feel has to be our ongoing concern. It's not just any one government, one set of laws. It is our collective effort to build a future wherein perhaps we are more closer than farther away.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of conversations today that hover around internationalization, but they also hover around internationalization in our political reality. And so I'd like to pause just for a minute and to think about that. And, knowing that our system has never been perfect, and I think that there is no system that is perfect. But our reality looks a lot different today than it did yesterday or a week ago or 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And I think that there's constant change that's happening there. So would you all talk for just a moment about what are the conversations that you're having right now in your administrative roles and your faculty roles, in the spaces that you're in related to this international status, in alignment with our political reality? What does that look like for you all right now? What are you talking about? What are students talking about? What are schools talking about? Institutions? I know that's a small question with a big answer. Who would like to start?
I can start on that. There's been a lot of conversations, especially in the last week or so. I'm the program coordinator as well as a faculty member and the advisor for my students. And so there's a lot of fear in terms of what's been happening with students hearing about visa revocation for things like getting a speeding ticket, right? Or a parking ticket. Students, even looking at certain demographics of students. Right now, at our institution, I think there's one of my students sent it to me this morning. There's a map, and I can try to find it in a little bit and maybe post it in the chat, where it shows all the institutions where students have been having their visas revoked. And so you can see if they're, if the institution is on there, and everything. And so I don't think our institution has had any yet, but there's rumors. And so rumors, right, can be just as damaging as the truth, sometimes more so, because there's a lot of confusion and concern. Our students were told, and actually not just our students, but our international faculty as well, that they needed to carry around all their documents with them at all times, that, their passport, any of their other information. And there were some suggestions. There was also an email sent out to all of our international, I think, students and faculty that listed all these things and gave some suggestions and tips. And then that email disappeared. I'm not sure why. Nobody seems to have it anymore. And so I think it might be that maybe something was in there that maybe they shouldn't have been in there, like some suggestions or advice or something that maybe legal counsel might have come back and said, hey, that you can't provide that exact. I don't know. I haven't found out yet, but that's a little concerning. I don't know what happened to that email. And it wasn't a bad email or anything. It was helpful, but right, if we think about administration, there might be some concern, like, oh, we have to also fall between with what's going on with our government in terms of our university administration, also being fearful too about what they can share or say, or what advice they can give, or what they can do, and having to fall within certain parameters and that kind of stuff. So those are just a few of the things that we're dealing with. But there's, again, fear and confusion and not sure what to do and those kinds of things.
Anyone else?
I echo on those points. The fear is the central phenomena going on. The more on the visas and increased surveillance, funding restriction has been the major impacts because of the geopolitical, again, campus political activities. At my institutions, we have been talking more about the budget cuts and its long-term impacts. Some institutions, for example, we have heard the Harvard University, facing the threats of losing their ability to enroll international students and scholars. Those situations are a bit, with the bigger tension between the government and institutional values of the inclusivity and academic freedom. So actually, yes, it's hard and serious
Anyone else? Mark?
I'll just add really quickly that as a person who came to the US as an international student from Iran, I usually think about how some of these conversations were not particularly new for me or a lot of other students from Iran, but I can think of other nationals that were always in that limbo or already were experiencing some of these. So I do wonder about, as much as unfortunate the whole situation is that it's scaling up in the way that it is, what would it look like if we actually talk about things that we had refused to talk about for such a long time, and just saying institutions are internationalized just because there are international students here, and now we're having to grapple with the reality that already existed. We just could put it under the rug, which was it was not visible, which goes on with a lot of ways that institutions work around, racism, all kinds of other systems that exist. So I think, to me, for what it's worth, there was something that was not visible and it's becoming visible. And I don't want to say that it's a positive thing, but I think there is a moment that at least we can collectively as higher ed think, what does this mean for becoming or creating an internationalized campus? And also acknowledging that these are the realities that have existed and now are existing in a different scale, and grappling with the questions that we have put off for a really long time, but we're already there. It's just people were not thinking about that.
I love that you said that, Milad. I just came back from a Fulbright abroad, and sometimes we are very privileged from an American or a Western lens. We don't think about the privileges that we had, and I was one of those who lost some funding, didn't get funding the last month that I was there. There was pauses and delayed reaction and no response, in some instances for those that I've reached out to say what's going on. And so until it impacts those that have the most privilege, sometimes we don't recognize the weight that others have been carrying. And so in some ways, I agree with you, right? This is conversations that many people have been having in many spaces, but perhaps not front and center right here where we are from this lens. And so quite insightful. Well, you all, I'm going to pause this here. We would like to move this conversation to a little bit more intimate space. We're going to go to breakout rooms here in just a second. Let me share my screen again. I apologize. So we would like to carry on this conversation. We'd like to think a little bit more about internationalization and all the aspects that come with it. But we would also like to talk about it from your perspective, where you're at. And so I'm posting some questions up here, and the moderators in each one of your Zoom rooms, you may choose the room that you want to go to. We'll carry this on a little bit further, and we can have some more intimate conversations. So what was your pathway, right, to being seen as an international practitioner, educator, faculty? What does it mean to be an international, whatever that title is that follows? And how has it changed since you first entered the field? What challenges are you facing, as well as what successes have you received? Because we don't want to say that everything's bad. There are still some amazing things that are happening out there. And so let's try to also talk about those positive things and the positive things yet to come, because when we go through any type of challenge, there's struggle, but there's oftentimes that we have things to celebrate, and we don't want to get lost in that conversation. So we're going to open up our Zoom rooms now, and then you all may choose where you would like to go. We're looking forward to meeting with you.
Back everyone. How many of us felt like we didn't have enough time in our little groups, raise hands here. We were just beginning to get started, right? I appreciate that. I'm pretty convinced that's the sentiment across the room. So let's give ourselves a little more time here out in the open. If you were one of the people who was saying something and then we pulled you out into the main room, feel free to go first and then the rest of us can join in. So inviting folks who are saying something, and if you are willing to share it with the bigger group, please do. This could also serve as the time for us to quickly summarize, share anything important you heard, anything that you thought was mind-opening, in my words, mind-blowing. Yeah, so that would be helpful to hear as well.
Or takeaways that you have from today, things that you're going to take back to your institutions, share, contemplate, ask about.
Or I would even say anything that maybe in terms of when you're thinking about internationalization or what that, definition means or how that's viewed on your campus, anything y'all would like to share as well.
I'd like to share the highlights of the session that I was listening in. It was so amazing that, that the history itself is a witness of why international education was so important. And Mike was building on earlier with the JFK and, this amazing program that he started with including the Fulbright programs to connect the dots. And over the years, yes, it expanded, although the current geopolitical situation is different. And also in the room, we were talking about the role of the faculty and these, teaching, learning concept and ideas, why it's so much US centric. Now, I guess many of us were also who are in the faculty positions, we have that privilege to make changes. I was recently redesigning the entire my international and competitive education PhD programs, and looking into what other universities have included in their curricula and those things. It was eye-opening to see what is missing. So it is our responsibility as a faculty, I guess, to include those missing voices or the space of the students and their culture, of those things. So I had a chance to redesign all of the assignment and bringing those stories. So as a faculty, you have that authority and privilege to look into and also get the insight from these students as well as the faculty colleagues. Now time is different, to bring our perspective and our experiences in those things. And again, going back to Mike, and I was privileged to have that many a scholar who wrote the books and articles for the multiple volumes of the journals and things. So that gave me a sort of a good opportunity to revisit and rethink about our courses, curriculum, and maybe that's one thing we can look and make changes in our teaching and learning. Thank you.
Krishna, I love that you said that that's, we have that privilege, but I'm going to add to that. I think we have that responsibility. And so I think that we need to take a little bit more ownership in that space.
I would also say too, right now ACPA and NASPA are working on redoing or looking at the competencies, right? And doing revisions. And I wonder if I was on a focus group like a year ago, so it's been a while, but I do know we have, and I don't know what the new ones are going to look like or how much they're going to change or anything. And I know we have one about social justice and inclusion, but I'm wondering if there needs to be more, right? Even based on what we're talking about today, like more of a focus on, internationalization or global dimensions or something like that because of, how important it is. So that might be, if anybody has an influence in those areas, maybe bring that up or talk about where are conversations happening about this particular type of thing when we're talking about the competencies.
It's funny, ACPA had a globalization strategic plan, I think in 2016, that I cannot find online anymore, anywhere. And now we have the ACPA, racial justice and decolonization imperative. And I think we live at a time that it has become really clear how the two are connected. So I think it would be really good for even associations to think maybe we need to bring these conversations together and not have them as separate and I think sometimes words become trendy and, people go with the trend. Here's a globalization trend, here's a decolonization trend, but at the end of the road, they are not that separate conversation. And for what it's worth, these days, it's very clear that they are connected.
I think the intersectional relationship of these, we often don't think about. When we think international, we think foreign, right? Which is our first mistake, but then also recognizing that many things related to race, ethnicity, and all other forms of identity are very heavily related to that conversation. So when we segregate those conversations, we leave huge gaping holes in our practice and our policies and our procedures. And so we have to look at things from a much more intersectional perspective. So I have one question for us to finish up on, and then I'm going to try to close this out. But I would like us to think for a minute, we can't solve all the challenges in the world today, and we can't solve all the challenges related to internationalization and our political situation, the environment that we're in, but we can find ways to support those who are experiencing difficulty. And I'm just wondering if we could share for a moment different ways that we think that we might be able to show support within our institutions with folks who are perhaps going through trials and tribulations as we're moving through this phase of our current history. Does anyone have ideas of things they can do differently or are doing on their institutions to show support and to be an advocate, an agent of change?
I was thinking that perhaps there will be a day when someone in an American class won't have to go abroad to understand that Americans have culture. Just saying.
I like that, Mike. As a faculty, I feel very compelled to turn that microscope around and really investigate what we're doing in our curriculum and our programming. Until we change, that won't change, right?
Well, even going into that a little bit about, how our administration and our institutions view the importance of those things. So, the resources that they provide helps shape that culture. And unfortunately, at our institution here, our study abroad office has been almost dismantled. The person who was in that area has now been put somewhere else, right? And so it's almost as if departments themselves have to then be responsible for any type of study abroad that is, is being done. And it might be, they might be talking about, resources and budgets and things like that. Fine, but it shows you what's valued, right? When you see where resources go. And again, that helps shape that culture or support the culture that's already there. And that can be very concerning. So.
Was that Dana?
Oh, Dana's still here. No, Dana's our immigration specialist. That would be Kim. Kim is going to a different place. So yeah, but our study abroad office doesn't really, it's not going to really exist in the space it is existing right now. It'll look very different.
Oh, okay, study abroad. Okay.
We have some great comments in the chat. Let me read a couple of those. As a supervisor in residential life, I have really gathered a lot new perspectives that I can share with my hall directors as they work with students in the building. This also has shown me how much more work I need to do to have a better framework or lens working with our global students, embedded into trainings. Let's see. Pankaj, you had a comment there. Work with students, help build better advocates and allies. Creating spaces for students to share their perspectives and thoughts directly with campus community as a way of, a student advisory board maybe to help. Not only share, but give them chances to leverage their lived experience to update and add to curriculum and training. I love that, giving them an inclusive voice. There's so many, putting a global lens on and asking questions to better understand and educate around this topic. I think the more questions we ask, the more information we gain and the broader our lens becomes. So ask questions, It's not a dumb question. If you didn't know, somebody else didn't know as well. So yeah, definitely start communicating. Well, I'm going to share my screen real quick. I want to thank you all first for being here today, and for hearing our kind of state of the space that we're in. Our time for today is coming to an end, though, and we'd like to take a moment to thank our presenters and our audience for giving us their time and commitment to this work. We'd also like to remind everyone that we are not done. Next week on Friday, April 10th, we will have another colloquium session. Oh, Canada, fallout from the 2024 changes in international student enrollment and immigration policies. And we hope that you will please consider joining us again next week so that you can partake in that and add to your toolkit. We also, before you leave, you've got a QR code here that you can scan. If you attend 3 out of the 4 sessions in our colloquium listed on the screen here, you can receive a certificate of completion. You just have to fill out the certificate sign-up form for each session you attend by 11:59 on Wednesday, April 30th. And you can click on the screen, the link, that's being put in the chat, but is also listed here for our link tree, or you can scan that code that's on the screen so that you can get that registration. We are so ecstatic that you joined us today, and we hope that you will hang out with us to attend our last session on April 10th. Our folks will hang around here for just a few minutes, but again, our gratitude to you for showing up today and being a part of the conversation. And with that being said, we will close out for today. Thank you all for coming.